Kia ora, everybody. Another man that's come with a few recommendations: Steve Nikolovsky, Adam Kavanagh, Mark Cluer, Keegan Smith, Guy Lawrence. Who else rates you big time, Dave?
Look, I don't I'm honoured that anyone thinks I'm worth talking to. So, and they're all great people to talk to. I'm honoured to know all those people. So, yeah, it's great.
What did you do on the weekend? That's where we usually start.
Look, I'm sort of diving back into work. So things are generally pretty hectic straight off the bat. I'm a pretty busy man. I guess the problem is, Ryan, is that I love my job too much. I guess that half the problem is people aren't doing what they're passionate about. And I was lucky enough to sort of spend a lot of time with Mark Cluer, which obviously is one person that you've had on your podcast. And Mark was my client, actually. Yep. So, and the one thing is that, having a transformation in his body and, his internal environment and his biochemistry made him realize that he wasn't probably following his passion. Do you know what I mean? So, and now his passion is to actually help, young men sort of bring out their true masculinity and, reach their full potential, and more people, if they're following their passion, they're going to have less biochemical issues, and they're going to have less digestive issues as well, because we know that, sadness and anger and all these negative emotions, they actually wear down your secretory IgA in your gastrointestinal tract, in your small intestine, and that's your immune system, that's your immunology. So that's just worn down by negative emotions, and if you're not really doing what you're passionate about, well, you're probably going to have some negative emotions. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not advertising, guys, by saying work extremely long days and so forth. That's sometimes that's been my weakness. But I love people and I love helping people. So I do love being at Fifth Element. And as I said, maybe too much, and my partner has to tell me to come home. Yeah. So it's a great environment to be around. But on Sundays it's all family time for me. We've had a little girl. She's creeping up to her first year on the earth, and for me, Sunday is all about spending time with them. And generally we like to get into nature, mate. So we didn't really have the time, so we actually walked the streets of Brunswick, which can be just as entertaining. So that's what we did. We went for a long walk, mate. Got our steps in, and probably helped with our cardiovascular system. And that's what Sundays are all about for me, mate.
Mate, so much to unpack there. I'll start off with with that gut response to how you're feeling. And there's wives' tales out there, and commonalities in feelings and being in touch with their body and things like that. And when you're not feeling good about something, you feel it in your gut, you feel tight, you feel in knots. And turns out that there's also a physiological background to that. How did you come across this full body, full scope idea that our feelings create the hormones, which create the environment, which create the ability for different functions of our physiology to happen?
Yeah, I guess the whole thing, Ryan, and maybe the people that you've spoken to prior to meeting me, I've gone pretty far down the rabbit hole, especially when it comes to biochemistry and especially gut health and gut function. And the one thing, the further and further I go down, the more and more I realize that the body is just working in total synergy. Yeah, and we've gone and I'm not disputing the skill in like looking at a particular cell or a pathway or something like that and understanding how that functions and then trying to manipulate it. But if you try to manipulate one particular pathway or one particular cell, what's the consequence that happens further down the chain? Does that make sense? And I've had to go really complicated to understand that the body is dependent on certain mechanisms for this synergy. Does that make sense? And, you know, and there's no debating those mechanisms that it's dependent on. Like, it's dependent on the building blocks, like, you know, amino acids and so proteins and lipids and carbohydrate molecules, and then micronutrients like vitamin C and B vitamins and vitamin K and minerals like magnesium and zinc. And, you know, and even if, like, because I've got the pleasure of looking at people's blood markers and so forth, the one thing that I understand is that those particular compounds, they're derivatives from something else. Okay. And if I give you one example, you know, you look at something like your stem cells, and your stem cells help with the production of, you know, white blood cells. So this is to do with your ability to fight off pathogens and bad bacteria. There's a bit more to it than that, but even like your red blood cells, and the major compound that actually helps with your stem cells is vitamin A. Yeah. So, and vitamin A, that's why I'm such a big advocate of things like cod liver oil and, you know, slow cooked meats and so forth, because they're good sources of vitamin A. And the thing is, if I give the person the building blocks for things like their stem cells and even like you look at vitamin C, that helps with the synthesis of white blood cells, but it's more to it than that. Okay. Because it actually helps with my catecholamines and cortisol. So if I utilize, you know, nutrient therapy and micronutrient therapy and amino acid therapy, they're multifaceted. Does that make sense? Which means, yes, they're gonna help with this, but they're also gonna help with this and this and this and this. But too often we're just looking at one thing to try and fix one particular problem, but then that has a consequence because we haven't really fixed this. Do you know what I mean? And I guess that's the whole principle of Fifth Element, is that I don't believe in a monotherapy. Yeah, like I hate to break the news to people, but, you know, and I'm a big advocate of things like ice therapy, and I'm sure you know that. But I don't think ice therapy is going to solve all your problems. No. Yeah, okay, like it's going to solve some of them that relate to issues that ice therapy benefits. Yeah, okay, but it's not going to solve all the problems. Yeah, and you know, it's just a tool. Okay, and the more tools I use in my toolkit, the closer I'm going to get to functioning as close to a human being is meant to function. Yeah. So, and that's the whole principle of Fifth Element. And that's why I think Guy Lawrence asked me a question. If someone stopped me in the street and asked me, what do I do? I'm a generalist. I've looked at gut function. I've looked at hormones. I've looked at ice therapy. I've looked at heat therapy, even though my background is actually a strength and conditioning coach. Yeah, okay. But I look at all those things because, you know, without looking at all those things, how can I actually help someone achieve optimal health? I would debate that with many people, that you can't. That even if your goal is to be an amazing strength and conditioning coach, my argument is, and a lot of the time people bring up, like, strength and conditioning coaches shouldn't be looking at blood markers and they shouldn't look at your gut health. And I go, but your job is to implement stress on someone. And so without looking at what's going on internally in their body, what you're prescribing for them could actually cause more harm than good, because you're not actually looking at those factors. I'm not saying you have to be the world's leading expert on it, but you must have some reasonable understanding of it. Yeah. So that's because we're dealing with a human body. That's why we have to look at multi-facet sort of areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, mate. No, I'm on board with you, and that's why I was excited to get you on. I was having a discussion today about, you know, what can I do as an optometrist for diabetes? And I put up a tweet on Friday that half my patients were type 2 diabetic, and I could go, oh, your blood vessel in your eyes, they're fine, I'll see you in 12 months. Or I can say, hey, do you know that you can reverse this? And nobody knows that, but you can. And then it's, well, here's some tools, here's some resources, here's some things that you're passionate about, and you often find a story of, this is a history of my family. I'm trying to lose weight, I'm trying to do this, I'm on these medications, and like you say, it's not just one thing, it's a complete environment. And when I tell them that the basis of the information I give them comes from, an intervention that involved, only 20 people, and 18 of them reversed their diabetes, and while they were at it, they also went off their cholesterol, and they also went off their blood pressure medications. They get really excited. And then you go further and you say, well, this is not just isolated, this is just an intervention in practice, but this is backed up by 400 people. 65% of them have reversed their diabetes. 96% of them don't take insulin anymore, and they're just looking at me like, why the hell haven't I heard this before? And then they go, I didn't expect that from my optometrist. It's like, well, I'm here. I'm talking to you for half an hour. This, I've got a responsibility, because down the track, if I don't do anything, you're going to come back with me and have bleeding in your eyes and scarring in your eyes and lose your sight,
100%,
and have a problem. And I'm here to help.
Yeah, 100%. Like I agree with everything you said, because a lot of the time we're looking at like surface face stuff. Yeah, and like even, and I'm not having like I want to make sure, like, your listeners, I'm not having to go at people. Do you know what I mean? Like, but if I look at sometimes in the realms of like physios and chiros and osteos and so forth, and the reality is, like for me, like with biomechanical issues, and of course I'm saying some people do actually have biomechanical issues, and that might have been caused by trauma and injuries and all these types of things. Yeah, okay. But most of the time when you've got things like digestive complications and biochemical imbalances and so forth, well, guess what? A lot of these problems can manifest in joint related issues and so forth, because you just got to look at where these building blocks come from, like tendons and ligaments, and because this is all to do with like collagen, okay, like connective tissue, and the building blocks for these things are like hydroxyproline, you got proline, you got glycine, you got arginine. Yeah, okay. So what's the building blocks? Essentially, it's protein, it's amino acids. Yeah, okay. Now, you don't have like this fairy factory in your body. Yeah, that's just going, oh, here you go, here's your proline, here's your glycine. Okay, because that's protein. So that's going to come down to me assimilating those nutrients properly, and that area is really broken with a lot of people. Okay, because they're not, for me, assimilation is everything. How you take food, how you break it down, your whole bodily function is dependent on that process. Okay, and because we've treated that area just like an absolute garbage tip, okay, then that means, guess what? You don't actually have the building blocks, and once again, I hate to break the news to people, but things like arginine and glycine, guess what? Your body's not going, oh, we just need them for connective tissue. Like, we just need them for your tendons and your ligaments and your joints and hyaluronic acid and synovial fluid, and because those things are a luxury. Yeah, like because those things like arginine and glycine, guess what? They're required for other functions in the body, which are to do with things like circulation, blood flow. Yeah, okay. Neurotransmitters, like, so especially glycine, because that's an inhibitory neurotransmitter, so it helps to relax and calm your brain down. Okay, and then glycine is one of the key building blocks that I need for things like glutathione. That's the master antioxidant in the body. Okay, so what people need to understand, if I'm putting my immune system under pressure, I'm highly stressed. Okay, because we've got in that moment in time, we've got three major priorities, and I'm not saying that they're the be all and end all, but in the moment in time when they're happening, the body has to deal with three major functions, because all three of them can essentially result in death if your body doesn't deal with it. Yeah, okay. And so one is stress response. Okay, and what I'm talking about here is HPA load, so HPA access, HPA dysfunction, so hypothalamus, pituitary, and the adrenals. Now, Why does the body have to prioritize the stress response? Because I just need people to understand, if I'm sitting here talking to Ryan, yeah, okay, and I'm eating my sardine salad, because I would probably eat a sardine salad, yeah, okay, and some guy comes charging at me from across the road. Now, which one's more important, me digesting the food or dealing with the guy that's coming at charging at me across the road with a knife? Yeah, okay. The guy with the knife, like, your body's not going to go, hang on, I've just got to digest the sardine salad. Yeah, okay, it's called gastric dumping. It's just going to deal with that. Like, it's not going to process it properly. Yeah, okay, because it just basically says digestion, whilst important, is not imperative at the moment. Yeah, okay, so we can do that again later. But what happens if that stress response is happening throughout your day? Yeah, okay, because once again, the body does not distinguish between that guy coming charging you from across the road with a knife, and then your boss nagging you, or you're not happy in your job, and and then you've got gastrointestinal issues, because if I've got bacterial issues, they're causing a stress response in the body 24 hours a day. Like, they don't go, well, Ryan's asleep, we better have a nap ourselves. Yeah, okay. Like, you're just dealing with that problem constantly. So that's one factor that your body has to prioritize. Yeah, okay. The second one is blood sugar management. Okay, because if I don't regulate my blood glucose levels, yeah, okay, what potentially might happen? Yeah, okay, well, I could slip into a coma and I could die. Yeah, okay. Like, so the body has to prioritize trying to stabilize your blood glucose levels. That's why if you're not trying to regulate it with food, yeah, and I was talking to Guy about fasting. I'm a big advocate of fasting, but understand, under huge amounts of stress load, yeah, okay, you can, and cortisol has one of the biggest negative effects on your blood glucose levels, yeah, okay? And so if I'm not regulating it through nutrients and so forth, then your body's got to call on cortisol to basically take from your amino acid pool and your nitrogen pool. So, and amino acids, key amino acids that you need, like glutamine and alanine, to regulate your blood glucose levels for you. Yeah, okay. So, and then that's, I'm not even taking into account that if I'm putting pressure on the pancreas because of things like glucagon and insulin, then the pancreas also has the role of producing pancreatic enzymes. And guess what the role of those pancreatic enzymes is to actually help you to break down macronutrients like protein, carbohydrates, and fats and lipids. Yeah, okay. But then you start putting pressure on that because you've got, you can't regulate your blood glucose levels and so forth. So you understand digestion is not going to take top priority in that instance either. Does that make sense? So, and then the third one is antibody response, and that's to do with bacteria. Okay. And very rarely people do stool testing. Very rarely people analyze really what's going on with the structure of their gut lining. Everyone talks about microbiome, but not too many people talk about how important that structure is, because if that structure is good, the microbiome tend to be reasonably good, as long as you're giving the body diversity in food and so forth. Yeah, okay. But if I don't deal with that antibody response, then the problem is that the bacteria might essentially start attacking my cells. Yeah, okay. And that's going to lead to illness and disease. Okay. So the body has to prioritize that, because the end consequence might be the worst scenario. Yeah, okay. And so you can understand, if you've got a lot of those processes going on constantly, well, guess what? Where do you think a lot of your resources are going to be put towards? Those three things. Yeah, okay. And guess what it's going to come at a cost to? It's going to come at a cost to important functions that aren't imperative in that moment in time. And that's going to be like your brain. That's going to be like your digestive system. Because once again, people are going to go, oh no, the brain's, that the brain's imperative. It's important. It's important. But I always say that you can be stupid and still function. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you understand that and even like for me, when we're talking about the joints, going all the way back to there. Yeah. Okay. But your tendons and your ligaments and your connective tissue and your muscle, if things are functioning exceptionally well in the body, yeah, okay, and you assimilate things properly, your microbiome's good, then guess what? Then you've got the luxury of being able to help to repair and restore the collagen and the connective tissue and all these types of things. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, mate. And I guess two things from that is, going back to another common saying is, if you're scared of something, you might shit yourself, and that's exactly what you're talking. There's no time to digest this. Let's get rid of it. And yeah, the gut microbiome just starts to complete a lot of stories, and you talk about, it shows up in places like even for myself, or had enjoyed myself over the Christmas period, and I'm sure that helps with the overt stress. But then at the same time, when you don't eat quite so good, your body starts to tell you other messages, like my hip started to flare up again, and again, like you talk about that connective tissue and things. And
because it just comes down to, Ryan, that you just, like, your body just doesn't have enough of the building blocks. Okay, like if I'm talking about tendons and ligaments, it's not just down to those amino acids that I'm talking about, but it's also things like copper, it's also things like manganese, it's also things like vitamin C, it's also things like B6. Okay, and the irony is when I've got things like intestinal permeability and so forth, your ability to absorb and assimilate things like B6 are actually impaired. And guess what? Once again, B6 isn't just responsible for one or two things. Okay, it's responsible for some of the highest amounts of enzymatic and metabolic pathways. Okay, and guess what? It's actually required for the synthesis of serotonin. Okay, and so then the person starts to get anxiety and depression and all, and that's why gut related issues, for me, mainly, how do they manifest? Firstly, they mainly manifest neurologically. Okay, because the amount of people that I've had come into my office and say, look, I'm really good physically, but I'm on antidepressants. And I go, well, then you're not good physically. Okay, because you most likely got severe digestive complications. Okay, because once again, we just need to understand. I always just try to educate people I try to empower people through education. Okay, like even my clients, and even, you know what, Ryan, sometimes they look at me and they just go, what the hell is this guy talking about? Okay, but I've got to put importance behind why I need them to do this. And most of the time, especially with things like breathing and cold therapy, and because we haven't spoken the language of science and we've made it sound very fluffy and hippie and so forth, you know what? And even with protein, we go, oh, you need to eat more protein because it's really good for muscle growth. Well, that doesn't put any importance on it, because you know what? Body composition is not imperative for everyone. Yeah, okay. But if I start saying that 20% of the human body is made up of protein molecules, yeah, okay, and the building blocks for your neurotransmitters are predominantly amino acids, so they're predominantly protein, yeah, okay, which means this is your brain function and your mood and your behavior, yeah, okay, because your neurotransmitters are biogenic, which means the precursor is amino acids, okay, so like serotonin, precursor is L-tryptophan. Where do you think you get L-tryptophan from? It's an essential amino acid. You got to get out of your food. Okay. You look at dopamine. Yeah. You need phenylalanine. You need tyrosine. Yeah. Okay. Well, where do you think you get these things from? Once again, you get them from food. You get them from nutrients. Yeah. Okay. You look at even histamine, which gets a bit of a bad rap, but understand histamine's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Yeah. Okay. And the building blocks for histamine, because as a neurotransmitter, actually controls my sleep-wake cycle. Yeah, okay, and that's L-histidine, which is an essential amino acid, which I get from things like salmon. Yeah, okay, good quality salmon that eats seagrasses and all these types of things. So, so they're biogenic, or they're amino acids that act as neurotransmitters. Yeah, okay, and even if I'm talking about hormones, well, guess what? You've got peptide hormones, and guess where peptide hormones come from? They come from amino acids, and that would be things like insulin and thyroid. And so because we haven't basically, because if most people perceive like things like their hormones come from their endocrine glands, and that's not incorrect, because that's actually where they get secreted from. Yeah, okay, or excreted from. That's where but that's not the building block. That's not the derivative where it came from. Yeah, okay, because if you look at like your hormones, they're either steroidal or they're peptide. And I've already talked about peptide, but steroidal hormones, the building block is cholesterol, lipids. Yeah. Okay. So that's testosterone, that's progesterone, that's estrogen. Yeah. Okay. But then we don't put any, look, I guarantee you, most people walk in my office, they think those things are just there, that they're just there. Yeah. Okay. Like, oh, they're just there. Yeah. Okay. Well, no, you actually need the building blocks. And if you've gone on really low calorie diets, like you've dropped your calories to like 900,000 calories. Yeah. You've been doing that for long periods of time, and you're under huge amounts of stress. You're putting your brain under a lot of stress, your body under a lot of stress. And understand, like, for me, stress management and inflammation management are the major things that we need to be doing with people. Yeah. Okay. Because if I can get someone to manage their stress better, that actually means they don't have such a high nutrient demand. Okay. Because, like, stress is depleting you from cholesterol massively. We know that through sports science, because it will excessive amounts of exercise deplete cholesterol massively. Yeah. Okay. Because you need it, because it's the building blocks for your steroidal hormones. Yeah. Okay. So and you also need cholesterol because it helps you uptake serotonin in the brain as well. And it helps you synthesize vitamin D. That's why I always say these things are just so multifaceted. Yeah. Okay. That's why you got to make sure that you have enough of it according to what your body requires. And guess what? We're all different. We've got all different requirements. We've got different microbiome. We've got different gut makeup, which means you're stimulating things differently. So the nutrient demands for people are different, but then we base it on energy in, energy out. Yeah. Again, we said that 1,200, 1,300 calories for women and then 1,800 calories for men. And I'm just going, well, based on what? Like, just saying that we're all the same human beings. Yeah. And so what I really try to stress with people, Ryan, is that you got to understand that we need these building blocks. Yeah. Again, without these building blocks, guess what's going to start to malfunction? Well, your brain's going to start to malfunction. The brain's predominantly made up of what? Saturated fat. Yeah, okay. And it's got a huge demand for amino acids and all these types of things, because helping with mood and thought process and all these types of things. Yeah, okay. But if we're not, if for me, it comes down to two factors. You might not be giving your body enough according to what it actually requires. Yeah. And the other thing is, when you put it in, you just don't break it down properly. Okay. And when I look at people's blood markers, I'm not looking to see if you've got some terrible disease, because for me, autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and, lupus and all these types of things, they're just symptoms.
Asthma, even hay fever.
They're symptoms. Yeah. Okay. They're symptoms of another problem. Yeah. Okay. And that problem generally is gastrointestinal issues like structure to the gut lining, whether that's problems with secretory IgA or whether that's problems with mucin or whether it's things like intestinal permeability. But intestinal permeability is a far more complex beast than people understand, okay? Because you've got different types of damage and gut structural issues within the small intestine. It's not just intracellular permeability. That is one type of damage. But that's the only type of permeability that people speak about. Yeah. Okay. So, but that's where the huge problems lie. That's why people are getting these symptom-based things. Yeah. Okay. And then I would also argue is that leaky gut and SIBO and maybe yeast problems and candida and parasite, they're symptoms of another problem. Yeah. Okay. And that problem most likely started in your brain. Okay. And that was actually just an overburdening, once again, of what I was talking about, like that HPA axis. Okay. And there tends to be, for me, like, because when we talk about HPA dysfunction, it normally comes down to four major factors. Okay. And those four major factors is, one is inflammation, which I've been talking about with gut related problems like SIBO and, bacterial imbalances and all those types of things. Yeah. Okay. I'm not saying inflammation is not a bad thing. Yeah. Okay. But you can have too much inflammatory load. Yeah. Okay. Really, really important for your listeners to understand is that inflammation what it does, it actually blunts the brush borders in your small intestine. So you actually damage the brush borders. And what's the role of your brush borders? Is actually to help with the production and the release of enzymes that actually help you break down macromolecules. So if I use one example, an example of that would be lactase. Guess what? Lactase helps you break down lactose. And then you get people turn around and go, well, I'm lactose intolerant. And I go, yeah, are you? Are you really? Yeah. Or you've actually just got damage to the gut lining. You don't produce sufficient levels of lactase, and then you don't tolerate lactose properly, because I'm sick of people persecuting food groups. Okay, like dairy's good. I'm not saying it's good for everyone, okay, because there might be a bit of an ancestral thing there, okay, but it's got things like glucose-sphingolipids, it's got immunoglobulins, it's got proline peptides, and it's got amazing building blocks for the immune system. So do not persecute something that is actually quite beneficial to some people. If I look at Sardinians, okay, well, 93% of all Sardinians consume dairy every single day. And guess what? They've got one of the highest longevity statistics in the world. Okay, so it puts to the sword the thought that dairy is bad for you. Okay, I'm not saying maybe for Oriental people, not so amazing. Okay, but for Sardinians, it's actually some of the best nutrients they can put in their body. Okay, where I'm saying, is it the problem of the food group? Okay, or is it actually a problem of your digestive system where you can't actually metabolize that particular food group properly? Okay, like even fructose for someone who's got intestinal permeability, because GLUT5, one of the GLUT proteins, okay, actually helps with the metabolization of fructose. Okay, now when you've got damage to the epithelium or the mucosal cell, you struggle with GLUT5, which guess what? That means you struggle with fructose malabsorption, fructose maldigestion. And so fruit, even though it's exceptionally good for you because it's got a lot of phytonutrients and so forth, but it might really aggravate your gut.
Yeah,
but once again, is that the problem of fruit? That's my argument. No, that's the problem of your gut lining. That's the thing that has to be fixed. Like persecution of fats. Like people go, oh, I've got fat maldigestion, fat malabsorption. I'm saying, well, that's because fats are extremely hard to digest. Yeah, okay. But in a good working gut environment, fats aren't a problem. In a poor digestive system, fats are an issue. Yeah, okay, they're hard to break down. But once again, people, that's not the problem of fats. That's the problem of that's the problem of your gut. Yeah,
mate, you've taken my mind everywhere there. Something I'd like to come back to. You talked about how you've got, say one nutrient does one thing, but it's not just one thing, it does many things. And isn't it funny that when we look at a whole food, like say well-caught wild salmon that's been eating on sea vegetation and smaller fish and things like that, that not only does it have these amazing proteins, but it's also got amazing fats and things that can, like you said, with that inflammation, help to resolve that inflammation, help to build the membranes of our neurons and so on and so forth. Isn't it amazing that when we ourselves are more in touch with, I guess, nature, and consume a species appropriate diet that nature provides back to us and helps us be across that whole spectrum of what we need.
Yeah, 100%, Ryan, because it's even a case of we're obviously also screwed around with the structure of the food as well. Okay, like you bring up about the omega-3 content of something like salmon. Okay, and omega-3s, without me going too far down that rabbit hole, okay, because I like people to cover the three major omega-3s, which is DHA, which is better for the brain, which you can actually get substantial amounts out of things like brains. Okay, because I'm really big on offal. Okay, I know people cringe, but I need people to understand there's a bit of social conditioning behind that. Yeah, okay. That's why you cringe. We are actually, if we look at the nutrient density, most of the time we've been eating the wrong meats, because most of the time we're eating a lot of lean proteins. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we shouldn't eat any lean proteins. Okay. But you understand that the higher nutrient density comes out of things like slow cooked meats and fatty proteins and proteins that come from the bone. They have all the building blocks that you actually need for your connective tissue and collagen and all that type of stuff. And then organ meats, okay, because they, like, if I had to say one food that I think is the most nutrient dense food known to man, I'd say liver.
Yeah, mate. Yeah.
Because like I've got essential fatty acids in there. You've got omega-3s, you know, because the liver is a storer. So guess what? It stores a lot of that nutrients in the liver. Okay, and it's such a clean organ because it's a detoxifier as well. So I've got huge amounts of, because people used to go, oh, it's a detoxifier. It's got that many toxins. Yeah, okay? Its job is to clear the toxins out. Yeah, okay. So it's got, like, you know, massive amounts of iron and fat soluble vitamins like vitamin A and vitamin D. Yeah, okay. So it's got the array of nutrients in something like liver is just, you know, ridiculous. And actually we could cut our meat consumption right down if we actually did start to eat a lot more organ meats. Yeah, okay. And so for me, if you ate something like brains, well, guess what? You get more DHA, which actually helps with your brain function, cognitive function. Yeah, okay. If I get a little bit more EPA, which you definitely get out of things like fish oil and good quality wild caught fish, as you said, Ryan. Yeah, okay. Well, that actually helps with inflammatory responses in the body, and especially things like prostaglandins. I don't know if you've ever heard of prostaglandins. I like to talk about these types of things, but prostaglandins.
We use one of them, well, I don't specifically, but ophthalmologists use one of them for glaucoma. It helps to restructure what's called the trabecular meshwork, which is a drainage channel in the eye. And yeah, it's as we all know, it's an immune mediator, and so thankfully it lowers their eye pressure and they don't get glaucoma. But at the same time, their eyelids and their mucosal on their conjunctiva and their eye, and they all become very sore and inflamed, and that's why people have to use them at night time so that they don't walk around with red eyes all day. And it also grows their eyelashes really long. So mate, prostaglandin is definitely on my radar. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah. That's all right, mate. It's good information. Yeah, and for me, like prostaglandin, like so EPA helps with what they call PGE3, which is like prostaglandin 3, which just helps to reduce inflammation. Yeah. Okay. So, and then you've got ALA, which is alpha linolenic acid, which obviously people harped on a lot about things like flaxseed oil, and I'm a bit funny about that because it does tend to turn rancid. Yeah, okay. So it's got to be cold pressed, kept in the fridge. But walnut oil is amazing for ALA. Yeah, okay. And if you actually use those three major omega-3s, it actually helps with the other 8 omega-3s. So that's why I like people to really try and get a lot of those omega-3s. You know, if we have to use supplementation, we have to use supplementation. But if they can get it out of their diet, amazing. Yeah, okay. But once again, it comes down to what the animal has been eating. Yeah, okay. Because you go back to the wild salmon. Well, wild salmon actually eats seed grasses and so forth. Yeah, okay. And that's what actually gives it the high omega-3 content. But like if it's not eating the foods that it's meant to be eating, well, guess what happens to the omega-3 concentration? It decreases. Yeah, like they've actually, they've seen that in, like chicken as well, which chicken, when it actually is wild chicken and is eating bugs and all the things that it's meant to be eating, the omega-3 concentration is actually higher. Yeah, okay. But then if it's farm, if it's, fed grains and foods that it's not actually meant to be eating, then that omega-3 concentration is like hardly anything. Yeah, okay. So, you can use so many examples of that, Ryan, in so many different foods. It's like even like fruits, and like people go on about how amazing fruits are for you, which I don't disagree with, because of those phytonutrients like anthocyanins, and which help with the clearance of uric acid and, beta carotene and resveratrol and all these amazing things. But guess what? They're all properties that are part of the fruit's immune system. Yeah,
Mm.
okay, so it actually helps to protect it against pests and insects and bugs and so forth. And guess what? So you start spraying the fruit with herbicides and pesticides, and guess what? The fruit doesn't really need to build an immune system. Okay, and so then you're eating the fruit, and you're not actually getting the best part about fruit. Yeah, and so people are eating this and going, I'm getting this, I'm getting that. I'm just going, well, probably not.
Mm.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, so yeah, like it's for me definitely the quality of obviously what, especially if you're eating animal proteins. And like me and myself and Guy are really big on the blue zone areas and so forth. I'm really fascinated, and yes, they do eat a lot of vegetable matter, but I think people need to understand they do eat animal matter as well. Yeah, okay, so it's not that they're only eating vegetables. And I know the Okinawans, one of the keys to their longevity is an actual powerful antioxidant called anthocyanins. Okay, and that actually comes from, because I think it's got 6,000 times the strength of something like vitamin C. Yeah, okay, and actually that comes from shellfish, so things like crabs and shrimps and lobster, and that's and what actually happens is they actually feed on this pink algae, which we couldn't sit there and just try to stomach all this pink algae. Yeah, okay, and so they eat the pink algae, and then we eat them, and we actually get that very powerful antioxidant, which actually causes, they actually say it causes less wrinkles and slows down aging and so forth. So, as I said, I just hate this persecution of food, and just understand that, these things have got amazing properties that actually help with our longevity and our optimal health as well. Yeah.
Yeah, mate. That going back to the bugs, that was something that really got me excited, talking with the team from Grillo who are making cricket bars. But the idea of industrial sized bugs for agriculture just got me really excited. So that's more like it. Instead of feeding all these chickens corn from a monocrop, feed them crickets that are grown in a square warehouse. And same with their fish meal for these farmed salmon. Instead of having this bright orange beta carotene fueled salmon, how about we give it some bugs, and then we'll get the true salmon.
100%. I mean, I think that's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
like human beings, we're capable of amazing things. Like I never doubt that. Yeah.
It's the same as seaweed. You said there, like things like bull kelp and sea lettuce, they grow so fast. If we could harness that, and it's amazing properties for fertilizing. It's amazing properties for cows as well, like eating seaweed now.
And obviously for our own health as well. Do you know what I mean? Because the amount of dietary iodine, I mean, you only have to eat a small amount of kelp to actually get your daily requirement of dietary iodine. The one thing, for me with iodine, the body recognizes a lot better from food.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not big on iodine supplementation. And sometimes, guess what? You can actually screw someone up more by actually giving them iodine supplementation. I'm not saying that, once again, I'm not saying it's never not necessary, but I'm saying, like, if we can, getting it out of a dietary source is definitely a lot better.
Mate, absolutely. Someone I've wanted to ask you, and it's on your t-shirt there, is what is the fifth element? Firstly, what are your first four elements, and then what's the fifth element?
Yeah, I mean, like obviously it is to do with sort of Chinese philosophy. Yeah, okay. And it really came about. We're talking about things like fire and water and air and metal and all these. Yeah, they're sort of the common known sort of Chinese 5 elements, and we're not sort of sitting here preaching those things, but our belief system is that it sort of comes back to what I was talking about right at the start. Like we don't believe in a monotherapy, but we believe there's sort of 5 major elements, and if you're looking at these and you're addressing these, that you're going to feel a lot better as a human being. Okay. And one of those aspects is strength. Okay. And for me, like, strength is the is the building block. Yeah. Okay. Like, and if I'm just talking from a training perspective and so forth, like that's the fundamental seed. Yeah. Okay. And like what people need to understand, I'm going to sort of get my sports science head on here for a minute, but if I've got like a muscle fiber, yeah. Okay. The key thing that I want to build first is like mass and strength. Okay, because once you actually build mass and strength, and I am going to have a go at things like F45 here and so forth, yeah, okay, and I'm not afraid to say that, yeah, okay, but especially with a beginner, I want to build that mass and strength, because if I build mass and strength within that fiber, then that allows me to recruit more motor unit pulls, okay, and then that means now I can work on things like explosiveness and speed. Yeah. Okay. And guess what? Then I can recruit more motor unit pulls within that fiber. Yeah. Okay. Till I reach the capacity. And then the next thing I need to do after that is then build more mass and strength. And then I can recruit more motor unit pulls again. And then I can even build more explosiveness and speed. And the problem is people they're not working on that seed. Yeah. Okay. They don't have mass. They don't have strength. And then they go and they want to recruit speed and power. Yeah. And then guess what? If you don't have that strength in the fiber and so forth, well, guess what? And you're trying to recruit speed and power, what's most likely going to happen? You're going to get injured. Okay. And that's why a lot of people, they're doing all this quite advanced and quite high intensity sort of plyometric work and so forth. And then their tendons and their ligaments and obviously nutrition is playing a huge role, what we already talked about, the building blocks that we need for that. But then they're getting tendon and overuse injuries and, ligament strains and so forth. Yeah. Because, if I just look in the athletic realms, for me to do sort of more complex plyometric work, the basis is you want to be able to do 1.5 times your body weight for a squat to qualify for that. Okay. And to do things like shock training, like depth jumps and all these types of things, you want like twice your body weight for a squat, 200%. Yeah. And then you got people just doing these things just because they saw it in Men's Health magazine or something like that. And I just go, well, yeah, you got to have the base to be able to do these things first. So to me, people are doing training where really they just don't have the fundamental base to be able to do it first. You got to build, like you don't start building a house and start putting up the walls. Like you just walk onto the property and start putting up the walls without laying the foundations. And it's the same thing with when we're applying stress and training stress to the body. You got to build strong foundations first. Okay, so strength is one of those. Mobility, and I'm more talking from a movement perspective here. Yeah, okay, because and I'm gonna just use one example. Like I'm really big, especially when it comes to articulation of the spine. Okay, like the spine is the hub of the central nervous system. Okay, and you've got like facet joints, and the role what the facet joints want to do, especially in the cervical spine and the thoracic spine, because everyone goes lumbar, and I'm telling you, the way that the facet joints are sort of structured in the lumbar is they sort of face inwards towards each other, which means they're not really built for. They're more of a stabilizer, where through the thoracic and the cervical, they're built for more transverse movement and articulation. And that's the reason that the lumbar sort of cops it, because you don't have good mobility through the thoracic and the cervical spine. Yeah, okay. So that's why we need to do far more complexity for the spine, more articulation, and a big emphasis, or someone had a big part in changing my mindset around that was one Keegan Smith, yeah, and another one was Ido Portal, who I spent a lot of time with two separate internships, yeah. And so if I start to get better articulation through the spine, well, guess what? The spine houses a lot of vertebrae, and within that vertebrae, you've got things like red marrow, yellow marrow. So this means you've got things like red blood cells, white blood cells. So believe it or not, guess what? Your spine actually houses a quite high production of red blood cells and white blood cells, especially red blood cells, and especially things like platelets. And then the role of the platelets is that they're jet transporters. They transport cytokines and neurotransmitters and compounds around the body. Yeah. And they actually help to transport your white blood cells when there's infection and to fight off pathogens. So if I get the spine to move more fluently, well, guess what? You actually help with these things. Yeah. And it also stimulates the brain as well. And there's a particular area of the brain called the LC, or the blue spot, or the locus coeruleus, which actually helps with the production of norepinephrine. And it actually, if I get more stimulation through the spine, then you stimulate sort of the base of the brain, and actually helps with the production of things like norepinephrine. Okay. And norepinephrine actually helps with focus and concentration. That's why when a lot of people do movement training, guess what? They go, oh, I just feel clear in the head. Yeah. And I just go, well, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Like, and they don't feel smashed, and they just feel more energized. So movement's a big one for me. Detoxification. Yeah. Okay. I guess it's a little bit more complex, but someone just initially switching their diet to, maybe in the instance where I would advocate, I'm a big advocate of a paleo diet. Just to understand, Ryan, I just don't believe in one nutrition outline for the rest of your life. I think everything has its merit. It's just understanding what is best for you in that moment in time. Yeah, okay? I'm a big advocate of, high fat diet. Not as much, like more. I like to emphasize high fat over ketogenic. Yeah, okay. Because high fat, 55-60% fats. Okay. Because so many people have gastrointestinal issues, and guess what? You're going to feel a lot better on a high-fat diet, yeah, okay, because it's an anti-inflammatory diet. You're not necessarily giving the bacteria the food source that it feeds on, because it's all down to inflammation, guys. Yeah, okay. And if you're feeding the bacteria the food that it feeds on that's causing inflammatory response in the body, it doesn't matter if that food is good for you. Okay, I'm not saying like bananas, for instance. I'm not saying bananas are bad for you, but they're an FOS, they're a fruit oligosaccharide, and things like negative gram bacteria. So if you've got an overgrowth of that, they feed on it. It's causing inflammation. Okay, and then remember what I said about inflammation blunting the brush borders in your small intestine. That's problematic. So, the one thing I would like to point out there is that someone's medicine can be another person's poison.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's like looking at things like detoxification, and like if I get someone who's not really eating, they haven't got a good lifestyle, and I get them to include a lot better quality amino acids, so things like slow cooked meats and all these types of things. Well, guess what? Amino acids really are some of the most important compounds that we require for detoxification and so forth. I mean, it's it's not down to a juice cleanse. Yeah. Okay. And you got to be really, really careful when you just start implementing a juice cleanse and you don't have good levels of things like magnesium and glutathione, because you're probably going to internally toxify and you're really going to screw up your body, actually. So people just doing these things at a drop of a hat. Yeah. And for me, it's like you just want to get the building blocks right first. And that is actually one of the best ways you can sort of start to detoxify, just cleaning up your diet. Yeah. Okay. And getting good nutrients into your body. Yeah. Okay. So, and then the other factor I would say that we sort of focus on is obviously nutrition. So nutritionally dense food. Yeah. Okay. And gut health. Yeah, okay. And obviously I've been talking a lot about like gut health, and I'm not saying that the gut is the mecca of everything. It's pretty close to it though. Yeah, it's pretty close to it. Yeah, okay. Like the thing is for me is that what we're probably most likely screwing up with is the communication between the gut and the brain. Okay, and like you talked about, people having that gut feeling. I always say to people is like, when you've had that gut feeling, you're walking down an alleyway, yeah, and then your gut tells you it's not the right thing to do. Okay. And I always say to people, how often has that feeling let you down?
Yeah.
Never. Yeah. Okay. And the same thing in your heart, when you really know it's the right thing to do. Yeah. Okay. How often has your heart really told you to do the wrong thing? Yeah. Okay. And I'd also argue most likely never. How often has your brain told you to do the wrong thing? Yeah. Okay. Like you take a bite into a donut and then you go, I shouldn't have done that. Yeah. Okay. And don't get me wrong, the brain's extremely important. I just don't believe there's one organ in the body that is the mecca, but we have basically said the brain is the mecca of everything, and it's only my opinion, Ryan. I just don't agree. Okay, it's like the brain is highly dependent on the gut, and guess what? The gut is highly dependent on the brain, just as the heart is highly dependent on the brain. Yeah, okay, and vice versa. Yeah, okay. And so what we've really interfered with is this. I think even Swiss scientists have proven that gut feeling does come from the vagus nerve and the enteric nervous system. Okay, and for people who don't know, the enteric nervous system is it's like a sheath that runs from like through the cerebellum regions, the base of the brain, into through the esophagus, like a sheath. You know, you've got like sheaths that cover your tendons, like a protective shield. It's a little bit like and it's made up of things like proteins and sensory neurons and neurotransmitters and all this. So it's a complex web. Yeah, okay. And it stretches through the stomach and the small intestine and the large intestine. Yeah, okay. And the enteric nervous system, you know, it's most likely responsible for about the production of about 30 neurotransmitters, and those include things like 50% of your dopamine production comes from this region. Yeah, okay. 95% of your serotonin. And then people go, oh, but it's the serotonin that's produced in your brain that's uptaken. I don't disagree with that. Okay. But guess what? Serotonin that is produced in the gut, what is it converted to? Melatonin. 300 times more melatonin is produced in the digestive system. That's why a sure way for me to tell that someone's got serious gut dysbiosis is just check their melatonin levels. Okay. And if they've got low melatonin levels, guess what? Probably got gut dysbiosis. They've probably got severe gut issues. I've never had anyone come into my office who's got serious bacterial issues, leaky gut type scenario, SIBO, whatever that might be, and they go, yeah, I sleep really well.
Yeah.
Okay. like it just doesn't happen. Yeah. Okay. And so the thing with the enteric nervous system, there's you know, it definitely is our lifestyle that is severely damaging that. Yeah, okay. And that's definitely caused by a lot of emotional stress. Yeah, okay. And so, and what I was talking about right at the start, like, you know, like negative emotions like fear and anger and sadness and no self-worth and no purpose and all these types of things. And they're really damaging that enteric nervous system. And guess what? Signs of enteric nervous system damage are things like neurodegenerative diseases, like Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's and all these. And, you know, Alzheimer's is big thing is like insulin, because they call it Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes now. But so what you end up having is you've got this poor communication between the gut and the brain. Yeah, okay. And if we don't have this synergy between the gut and the brain, well, guess what? Like, how many different complications can arise in the body, you know? And what even makes up part of the enteric nervous system, which is a vital piece for the parasympathetic nervous system, which I always say to people is we sort of like a seesaw, and we're going between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And for me, a lot of the human body is like that seesaw, where we're going between periods where we should be eating more and eating less. Yeah, okay. And be in different energy systems and so forth. But most of the time we should be in the parasympathetic nervous system. And then people can have problems with the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is the gateway to the vagus nerve. Yeah, okay. And to the parasympathetic nervous system. Yeah, okay. And so then the vagus nerve helps with anti-stress compounds, and those anti-stress compounds are things like vasopressin, yeah, acetylcholine, yeah, okay, prolactin, yeah, okay. And we only look at some of these things, yeah, and what we know about oxytocin is the other one, yeah, okay. And what we know about them is quite surface based. Does that make sense? But we look at vasopressin, we go like, that's an antidiuretic hormone, which 100% it is. But guess what? It actually helps with mental clarity. It actually helps with your short-term to long-term memory. Guess what? Vasopressin gets really taxed when people drink a lot of alcohol. Yeah, okay? Because antidiuretic hormone, and guess what? That's why people complain about no mental clarity and so forth when they're drinking a lot and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brain is, and so my point being is that we're affecting with those anti-stress compounds that actually help with their ability to deal with stress overload and so forth. Does that make sense? So that's why we put such a big focus on the gut. Yeah. Okay. So there's one more I've forgot to mention. I've talked about strength. I've talked about mobility. I've talked about detoxification. I've talked about gut, and the big one is just stress management.
Yeah.
And like, to me, stress is changing the game. It's changing the game. It's changing. It's negatively affecting blood glucose, which I've spoken about. Yeah. It's affecting how we utilize nutrients. It's putting a lot of demand on nutrients. It's putting a higher demand on nutrients than ever before. Yeah. Okay. It's just there's so many different factors. It's causing us to wear down our gut lining. Yeah. Okay. Believe it or not, stress, high amounts of chronic stress, will actually cause like little gastrointestinal fissures, like sort of bleeding in the gastrointestinal tract. Okay. It's causing us to deplete a lot of these amazing cofactors, like minerals and vitamins and even the building blocks like amino acids, because we just need them to deal with the stress response. Yeah. Okay. And that's why I say, when people say that they want to intuitively eat. Yeah. Okay. Well, people need to understand that stress changes that ball game. And why it does is because when I'm, going through a stress response, you produce more of a particular hormone called corticotropin releasing hormone, CRH, and immediately an excessive amount of CRH. Guess what that does? It downregulates ghrelin. That's your hunger hormone. Guess what? Ghrelin also helps with the secretion of growth hormone. Okay. So the only reason I bring these things up is because people need to understand it's all interconnected. Yeah. Okay. And so then the person goes, "Oh, I'm just not hungry." And I go, "But that doesn't mean your body doesn't want nutrients."
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and so they're saying I'm intuitively eating. I said, no. Like, when you're intuitively eating, is that you put stress management practices in place. So you're doing things like metacognition and meditation. You're doing things like heart math, because these things, guess what? Because they mitigate stress, which means they enable you to be more effective at utilizing nutrients. And so you're not putting such a demand where you're having to bombard the body with more nutrients, which, guess what? I sit there with people, Ryan, and I say, okay, these are your two options. Yeah. We're either going to manage the stress by giving you more nutrients so that you've got better cognition, you've got more building blocks for the gastrointestinal tract, your hormones, your neurotransmitters, so you can function better. Or you're telling me you don't want to eat more food. Yeah. Okay. So you've got to do more stress management. Okay. My goal with people is that they do more stress management, fix up assimilation, and then we don't have to eat as much nutrients. And let's face it, a lot of the food, even if you're eating high quality food, guess what? It's not as nutrient dense as it once upon a time was.
Yeah. Yeah, we've stuffed the topsoil just a little bit there, and the more regenerative, more slow paced way we can make our food better, and the more we can return nutrients to the soil, is the better. And you talk about slow cooking there and bone broths and things like that. It's something that I've really started to utilize. We've got this sandy piece of dirt in our backyard, and I've been tucking the bone broth ruminants into it, and all of a sudden it's starting to brown up and be less crumbly, and we've got some lettuces and basil in there, and it's actually surviving. So it's really exciting to see. And you're talking then about the enteric nervous system and meditation, and how that gut brain axis is really highly interconnected. And one thing I do with my patients who struggle to read or they've had a concussion and their sympathetic nervous system is really hijacked is we do those 5 long breaths or box breaths. We get them to have a deep breath and expand their gut nice and large. And the thought is that maybe it stretches that vagus nerve and really helps them to tap into that sympathetic nervous system. It's interesting you say about some of the neurotransmitters that get released there, and all of a sudden their focus, their function over their accommodation comes back, and they can read all of a sudden, or they can converge their eyes. Because if your sympathetic nervous system's jacked up, you're not worried about having a relaxing, unwinding, slow read of a book. You're worried about that tiger or that perceived tiger that modern society throws at us, and you can't read. And so, you know, you mentioned Guy's name there, and he's big on meditation. What sort of practice do you do, and what does it mean in your life?
Yeah, I mean, Guy was a big influence on me when it came to, look, I'd say meditation and metacognition was sort of like the cherry on top of the cake for me. Yeah. Because do I invest a huge amount of time into good nutrition? 100%. Yeah. Do I consume things like slow cooked meats and organ meats? And do I, eat organic and high quality food? Yes. Do I train smart? Yes. Do I do a combination of movement training and strongman training and strength training? Yes. Do I do things like heart math? Yes. Do I do things like cold therapy and heat therapy? We've got infrared saunas. We've got a permanent cold tub here. Do I do I do Wim Hof breathing, which is a forced, it's a forced hyperventilation. It is a dive. You should be doing it through your diaphragm, which means, and research has shown that it actually helps to control the autonomic nervous system. So it's controlling that balance between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system state. Yes, I do that. The one thing I probably wasn't doing exceptionally well until I really became good friends with Guy was probably meditating properly. Yeah. And yes, I did things like, headspace. And so I know most of the time, to be honest, Ryan, I'd find that I was just falling asleep. And obviously I might have been getting the benefits from a power nap or, and so there was some benefits in that, but I wasn't really getting the benefits of, producing more gamma waves. And we know that producing more gamma waves actually helps with your capacity to learn. Okay. And your that short-term to long-term memory. Yeah. Okay. And your ability to retain information. But the big thing with gamma waves is that it also helps with, it actually inhibits a particular enzyme called monoamine oxidase. And that actually, because that can inhibit the higher releases from the pineal gland. So things like melatonin and DMT, like dimethyltryptamine, which obviously that helps tap into the subconscious. Yeah. And so, for me, Guy slowly introduced me to metacognition. And I'll be honest, the first week that I did it, because it really was taking me from that sort of real, I guess, that in heightened state, that more sympathetic nervous system state where, to be honest, Ryan, like I can do extremely long days. I'm doing a lot of consults. I'm dealing with people who've got serious health issues, people with autoimmune and cancer. And I'm going to be honest, these people are in very bad emotional states as well. And that you can't help it but to absorb a lot of that. Yeah. And I do it because I really want to help people, and I love people, and I think people are just amazing. Yeah. But it's human. Yeah. You are going to absorb a lot of that. And I probably wasn't doing things to deal with what was going on in my head. Yeah. Okay. And like everyone, I've had I've had pain in my life. Yeah. And, my best friend, he he died a couple of months. He drowned before I opened Fifth Element, and that was something I didn't really deal with. So metacognition and doing that really created a lot of conflict in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say that these things, they always test you initially. Yeah, you get in an ice bath. Do you reckon it's easy? Of course it's not easy. It's hard. Yeah, okay. You know, when you do a gut protocol, is it easy? No, it's hard. Yeah, okay. You get like a Herxheimer reaction. You get die-off. The bacteria is not going to be too happy about this. And guess what? You're going to have to persevere. And you're going to have to pull yourself through the mud. And it's a little bit like that for me with metacognition. Yeah, I you know, the one thing I know how to do is persevere. Yeah, and I kept it up. And even though it was creating weird conflict in my brain where I was going into the yoga studio and I'd fall asleep during the day, I would say to my business partner, I didn't want to be at work. I would go home. I wouldn't do any study or like any extra research, which that's the stuff that I'm really passionate about. And I want to look at clients' issues. And my body basically just told me to slow down. Yeah. But once I got through that pain point, I just handled stress way better. Yeah. Like, my capacity to retain information increased. I would find, because I do a lot of seminars, I do a lot of presenting, and I would find that I was just never overwhelmed. Yeah, that I was, you know, and I've never used notes when I do seminars ever. I know people might find that hard to believe because I'm talking about bloods and that. Anyone who's been to my seminars, I never use notes. Yeah, like I said, everything I tell people, I know. Yeah. And so, but that went up another notch.
Nice. From
doing metacognition. And, you know, I don't sit here and begin to say that I'm an expert. You know, I leave that to people like Guy and Joe Dispenza and all that sort of stuff. But do I point people in the direction of Guy and Joe Dispenza and the people who know, you know, how to implement this stuff? Of course I do. Yeah, okay, because I can fix your gut issues, Ryan, and I can fix the structure in the gut. But guess what? If I don't fix what's going on in your head, like social conditioning and perceived stress and, belief systems and so forth, well, guess what? If I fix your gut and you just go straight back into all those emotional states that cause the gut issues in the first place, well, guess what? You're going to come back to me and you're going to have some other different parasite. But ultimately, it was caused by the same problems.
Yeah, mate. You brought up social conditioning there, and I guess especially when it comes to men, approaching your feelings and your thoughts as well is quite tough. And you can talk on that as well if you like. But I was really, you know, Twitter's probably a bad place to waste your time. But yesterday I was reading a tweet from some comedians who were taking the mickey out of an article. I think it was from the Daily Mail or the Guardian or something like that, and it was looking at a bunch of biohackers and what they did in the morning, and you know, they were probably tapping into those sort of five elements. You know, they were getting up, they were meditating, they were doing cold exposure, they were doing workouts, they were breathing, they were spending times with their family, and you know, these people were just poo-pooing it, saying, "Oh, I'm, you know, barely getting out of bed," and then you looked at, you know, again, something that you shouldn't do, looked at comments, and it's like, "Oh, I wish I feel like crap in the morning. I couldn't do this, couldn't do that," and you know, social conditioning says that the people that are optimizing their life, people that are, you know, not stressed, just, you know, doing their passion, are the weird ones. What do you say to that, mate?
Yeah, well, I am pretty passionate about this because I've led to opposing lifestyles.
Yeah.
And my first lifestyle, which I would never go back and change, because if I did, I wouldn't be talking to you now, and I wouldn't be talking to you about the things that I'm talking to you about. So hardship creates passion. You know, like I'm a big believer in that. And so, you know, I partied a lot. And when I say a lot, I push the envelope. Yeah. I trained exceptionally hard, and whilst most people are going to perceive that's amazing, I just need people to understand, training is a stress. And if you're not utilizing that stress properly, well, guess what? You can actually cause more damage on the body. And I always argue with, I always will argue with people that, lifting something above your head, like Olympic lifting, whilst I'm a big advocate of it, and yes, I advocate certain people using it and so forth, doing that multiple sets, multiple reps, and doing that 4 or 5 times in a week. That's not normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's not normal. Yeah. Okay. Like, we wouldn't have been doing that if you actually look at the areas in the world where they have extreme longevity, like Okinawa and Sardinia and so forth. Like, they're not doing Olympic weightlifting. Okay. They're not running marathons. Yeah. Okay. They're just moving. Yeah. Okay. So, and I'm like, as I said, but it is a stress. Training is a stress on the body. Yeah. So, and I was training exceptionally hard. Yeah. And I had my finger in too many pies with training. Yeah. Okay. And I was sleeping very little. Yeah. I definitely back then wasn't meditating. Yeah. And I was eating, things that I didn't respond to well, with, like gluten and gliadin. And people need to understand with because that's a topic in itself, but people need to understand the negative responses you have to something like wheat proteins and so forth. 3 of the major responses that you will have to the wheat proteins and so forth are neurological. They actually affect the brain. People go, I don't get any digestive responses when I have wheat, and I go, well, okay, well, it's only 2 of the responses out of the 5. Okay, like you've got like gliadin, transglutaminase complex, okay, which is you actually autoimmune response. Okay, and then you've got transglutaminase 3, which is the brain and the placenta. So it actually affects the placenta when pregnant women and so forth. And then you've got transglutaminase 6, which is more the brain, and central nervous system. So I was sort of lucky, because when I would eat gliadin and gluten, I got a digestive response. Yeah, okay?
That's what I was about to say. We're probably one of the lucky ones, because it doesn't take long to get that reminder that, hey, you shouldn't eat that.
No, I mean, I get bloated and I get flatulence and I get diarrhea, and so I just go, well, I don't respond well to this. Yeah, okay. And then it's the obviously the chemicals from the herbicides and the pesticides that people can respond to. But I was consuming these things, and they obviously didn't agree with me. But then people would say that was a normal lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like me putting all these toxins into my body, having chronic asthma, having chronic hay fever, where I'd have to have steroidal injections. I used to have 3 inhalers. That's how bad my asthma was. Okay. But that's normal.
Yeah.
That's normal. Yeah. Okay. And then now I live this lifestyle where I eat clean. Yes. In a country like Australia, I avoid gliadin. I avoid gluten. If I went to Sardinia, because it's tritium durum wheat, I'd consume it, because it's a clean form of wheat. Yeah. Okay. But I'm not going to consume it in Australia, because even things like the glyphosate and the weed killer that they're essentially putting in it, which the people can react to. Yeah. Okay. So I avoid these things, and then I do ice therapy, which people think I'm crazy for doing. Yeah. Okay. But yet, for me, I feel more energized. It actually helps with my white blood cell count. Yeah. It actually boosts up my immune system. It reduces my inflammatory load, so I don't get these inflammatory responses that a lot of people do. I feel great when I train and all these types of things. I'm doing heat therapy. I do diaphragmatic breathing. Yeah. I do heart math at night. And just the fact that I eat clean, people say that's extreme. And I like my example of extreme was my previous life.
Yeah.
That's extreme. Yeah. Okay. Because I was putting things into my body that my body ultimately over time couldn't handle eventually. Yeah. Okay. And I was pushing the envelope, lack of sleep. Yeah, okay. That's an extreme lifestyle. I'm not living the extreme lifestyle now.
No.
I'm living the lifestyle that is giving back to my body. So people need to understand what extreme is, because most of the time it's what we classify as normal. That's really extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or common. Mate, I resonate hugely with your life course, and I'm sure it's completely different, but a lot of similarities. And even now, we're both in a similar life course of a young child coming onto its first year. Another thing that I guess the societal conditioning sort of tells you to is to not be emotional, and having a daughter's just been hugely emotional. I think I wrote it the other day, but I think the day she was born was the first time I've ever cried tears of joy, and it was just absolutely incredible. And then at the same time, you speak about challenges and how it defines you and how it makes you analyze yourself. It hasn't been easy, and it's not easy. What it's such a whirlwind to unpack. But how's it been for you, man? And how are you coping? And what do you love? So much love involved in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that people have said to me, you can't explain it until you experience it, and now I understand why.
Yeah.
Because I could try and put it into words, and I just don't think it does it justice. Has it changed me as a person? Of course. I think I was on a pretty positive path, and now I think it's even more positive. Because sometimes, because I love to help people so much, can that come at a cost to my own self-care? I'm going to be honest, Ryan. Yes, sometimes. Yeah. The health industry can be funny like that, because you can be investing so much time into helping other people that sometimes your self-care can drop off. And sometimes mine is just like working extremely long days. But having a little girl made me observe that. And now, if I've got work that needs to be done, and it hits because before sometimes I'd work till 12, 1 o'clock. Yeah. Which Bianca, my partner, was always not happy about, and, and always concerned about. And now having a little girl, and I hit that 10 o'clock, and it's because now the most important thing for me is that I'm exuding like positive emotions, and I'm in a positive energy to be around my daughter. Because if I'm coming home and I'm exhausted all the time, and these emotions that I'm absorbing from other people, I'm putting that across. Well, guess what? Emotions my little girl's going to absorb, and and I don't want that for her.
Yeah.
So, I would say that it's made me observe myself a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for myself and Bianca, we put a lot of time into making sure that we brought a extremely healthy baby into the world. Like, we did stool testing prior to conceiving. Now, once again, people are going to probably listen to that and they're going to go, my God, that's extreme. Well, for us, it's not about us.
Yeah.
It's about a little girl, okay, and making sure that she's got all the right building blocks and so forth, that she doesn't have issues when she's developing and when she's young. Okay. And Bianca invests a huge amount of time into preparing good nutritional, macromolecule and micronutrient dense food for her. And you look at babies, and they probably don't really produce things like amylase, which is an enzyme that helps us break down carbohydrates, to about 8 months or or in between 8 months and 2 years. So guess what? Like, probably not the best thing that you can feed them straight off the bat is things like white rice and bananas. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And you got to understand that between that 0 to 3 years, that's the development of their microbiome, because the microbiome fully develop at about the age of 3. Yeah. And we know that microbiome play a massive role in the production of neurotransmitters and hormones, and even how we clear things like estrogen out of the body. Yeah. How we synthesize and micronutrients. Yeah. And how we uptake particular vitamins. Yeah. And nutrients. Yeah. Okay. And so that development between that 0 and 3 is vital. Yeah. Okay. And that's where the gut lining, the structure develops more, because that's when their immune system develops more. Because for me, your gut lining, when I was talking about secretory IgA right at the start, that's your immune system. Okay. And then if we're affecting that and that doesn't fully develop, well, guess what? What do you think is going to happen from about the age of 3 onwards if that hasn't developed correctly? Well, that's why we're seeing children get autoimmune conditions like Crohn's disease. And like one of my clients came to me with her baby girl who had Crohn's disease at the age of 4.
Jesus.
Yeah. Okay. Which, Crohn's disease is a direct response of issues with T regulatory cells. And guess what helps with T regulatory cells? Like butyrate. That's a short chain fatty acid. Yeah. Okay. So that's structural issues and microbiome issues within the gastrointestinal tract. So, like we put a lot of time into making sure that our baby girl has the best, and I'm not saying that we're going to shield her from when she goes to parties, like having sugar. We're not going to shield her from that stuff, but we're going to make sure that she's got all the right building blocks, that she's going to have great ability to learn, and she's not going to be hampered by particular ailments, and and minimize her risk of autoimmune issues and all these types of things, which really becomes a thorn in your side to you really achieving what you want out of life.
Absolutely, mate. You touched on many things I'm passionate about there, and that was why it was so awesome to get Lily Nichols onto the podcast, because she talked about that. Before you even consider being pregnant, get as great as you possibly can, and that was probably what led us to even having a baby. Is Alex had endometriosis, and she didn't take that surgery and cured her. She went in and saw an integrative practitioner, and he treated her with many of the things you've spoken about today. Changing that.
Yeah, because like
getting protein up, fixing.
Well, because endo is just linked to structural issues within the gut, like intestinal permeability and deficiencies, like magnesium deficiency as well.
Yeah,
I mean, like, which means with the magnesium deficiency, it means that we're not able to synthesize and uptake it properly. Does it make sense? So,
absolutely.
I mean, like putting time, like if you want to bring someone into the world and you want them to have the best start in life, you've got to put time into yourself. Yeah, like it's just that simple for me, and that means not just even from a biochemical perspective and microbiome and all this, but guess what, from an emotional perspective as well, because like that environment, that emotional state that you and your partner are in all the time, like that's what's going to rub off onto your child.
Absolutely, mate. And you talk about what you then feed the child. And when I was talking to Adam Kavanagh, we're talking about the carnivore diet and stuff, and I said I just find it so fascinating that Billy now, she just wants to steal all of my bacon. I can't even have breakfast now without her trying to steal it. And she has liver, and she loves chicken and gravy and all that.
Yeah,
like I say, easily digestible, nutrient available stuff. That's just
and it's the same with Brea. I think my great aunt, who she's 97, and at Christmas she just couldn't believe Brea consuming all this animal protein. Of course she eats her vegetables. I mean, she loves vegetables as well. Like my mum just can't believe it. She goes, "Oh my gosh, she just loves her vegetables. She just loves food."
Yeah.
And we just, you know, and I think one time Bianca gave her banana and she spat it out. I'm not having, as I said, I'm not having to go at bananas. Yeah. She just spat it out all over the floor, I think. Yeah. Okay. And that's just too sweet for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's because what we've started her off on is loads of vegetables, you know, starchy vegetables like pumpkin and sweet potato, and making sure that she's getting such a high diversity of nutrients. And yes, we do give her slow cooked meats and all these types of stuff because these are all the building blocks that she requires for her development.
Mate, I think Billy's first food after she'd had a liver drink it was my birthday, and we're having a slow cooked dorper lamb shared, and yeah, that was the thing that she just hoed down on. You said about your weekend and getting out in nature in the sunshine, and this will be our last topic.
Yeah.
There's been a great article going around about the sunshine and vitamin D, and you know, again, all these downstream effects of what vitamin D from the sun can do for us, and lower our blood pressure, and increase our good hormones, and improve on depression symptoms, all these sorts of things. What for you is about being in nature, getting the sun on you, being with dirt and trees and leaves and wind, and you know, I'm lucky to live over the road from the beach, and I'll make as much of an effort as I can, and that's why we moved here, to be in that sort of environment and bring Billy up at it. What is it for you, mate?
Yeah, I mean, like you bring up some really good points, and like I know a lot of people talk about the sort of the vitamin D factor with the sun, and actually, you know what? Like, actually, it's other compounds that you get or that you produce when you're actually in the sun that are even more beneficial than something like vitamin D. Don't get me wrong, vitamin D is really important, but you got things like beta endorphins, which acts like a naturally occurring opiate. That's why like you feel so happy when you get in the sun. Yeah, okay. And even things like adrenocorticotropic hormone. Yeah, okay. And that actually, so that's essentially a stress hormone, but understand it's a good thing in small dosages. Does that make sense? So, and that actually helps with a thing called interleukin-4, which is like anti-inflammatory. So that actually gets stimulated when you get the sun. And I guess I understand, and so there's more to it than that. And I understand why people feel so good when they get in the sun and so forth. I would say I'm probably a bit more of a, and obviously nature bathing is a big topic, and we're obviously understanding the benefits of things like negative ions, and getting into freshwater streams, and getting in the ocean, and because most of the things we put in the body are like positive ions, so getting more of those negative ions, it tends to, without getting too technical, like energize our system. Yeah. And like for me, nothing is as noticeable as that sort of that biochemical energizing effect on the body than getting into nature. I'm a bit of a waterfall chaser myself, and it's I'm big on cold therapy, but I definitely know if you can do it more in nature, that the biochemical reactions in the body are even more powerful, rather than sitting in a cold tub in the gym. Don't get me wrong, like I do that, and there's benefits to doing that, but doing it in nature, there's even more benefits. And then I would say doing it with the people that help to make you better people. Like me and Mark definitely go seek out waterfalls, and with my partner Bianca and Brea, and we do it in the community environment, which means we're getting the added benefit of things like BDNF, like brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So, so you get this one thing that's got all these powerful biochemical benefits, and then you add another element to that, and then another element, and then the biochemical benefits in the body are huge. Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm to be honest, Ryan, I love the cold. Yeah. So I'm not always, don't get me wrong, there's obviously all these benefits that I was talking about, getting into the sun. I also do believe that people shouldn't be dictated by the weather.
Yes.
And, you know, like I could say that maybe there's some biochemical imbalances if you only feel happy if you're in the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, because actually people who've got low serotonin are heavily dictated by the weather. They're like, oh, the sun's out, I feel amazing and happy, and then now it's raining, I feel miserable. Like, but there's amazing things to rain. Yeah, okay, like, and I, like, for me, like, I go, well, that's amazing. It's like, so for me, I don't like the weather never dictates my mood, and most of the time I'm appreciative for anything that gets thrown at me. Yeah, so and I think people need to be more like that. Yeah, okay, because there's as I said, there might be a little bit more at play if you only feel good when it's sunny.
Mm.
Yeah, so like I love getting into to harsh environments, and actually the people that I'm generally pretty intrigued with in the world are people who lived in some of the harshest environments in the world, like the Inuits, and that's why I went to Greenland, because I was so fascinated with them, because they um, you know, withstood some of the harshest environment, and they knew how to do that through nutrients and the things that were going to sustain them through harsh winters. And so, and guess what, the Vikings had a couple of goes at it, and they couldn't actually survive in that. They eventually did, but there was actually a couple of times where they couldn't actually survive in such a harsh environment. So, I mean, you know, the ability for the human body to find a way and adapt is phenomenal. Yeah, okay, because the body will adapt if you give it the chance. It will adapt, and yeah, and so sometimes, you know what, don't always go to the beach. Yeah, sometimes get up into some cold environment and expose yourself. Like, let your body do some work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
mate. Absolutely. And
yeah,
as someone with heavily Irish heritage from the bottom of the world of Invercargill, when it's supposed to get to 37 degrees on Saturday, I'm definitely someone who misses the cold every now and again.
yeah. Me too, mate. I've got O'Brien as a surname, so there's good Irish blood in there. Yeah, so we'll probably ancestrally we'll probably born for the cold, because wouldn't have seen the sun too often. Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah.
mate. Although I tan pretty well, so there must be a bit of Spanish or Italian come through there. Eh?
Well, yeah, we're always a little bit of mixed race. That's why it actually makes it so hard with the ancestral side of things, even with nutrition. And so I'm big on understanding that ancestral side and what foods that you probably tolerated better. But with so mixed race nowadays, that's probably not the major tool to go off.
Yeah, mate, we didn't get into this topic, and we'll leave it for another day, but where do people get to you if they want to find you or Fifth Element Wellness, mate?
Yeah, so look, it's, for me, like, you can obviously get onto our Facebook. Yeah, you know, Fifth Element Wellness, and you can follow that. You can get onto our website, yeah, www.5ew.com.au. Yeah, you know, look, I take a lot of seminars if people are interested in. I take a blood seminar. We've got level 1, we've got level 2, level 3, which is more about like stool analysis and so forth. I also teach about the gut. It's a 1-day seminar. So there's lots of educational seminars that we take. We're about to launch a corporate program as well. Obviously, that's more to try and help executives in the corporate world and so forth, which is based on a lot of the principles that I've spoken about today. And last year I actually went away for a month and I wrote a book. So, and you know, hopefully that's going to be coming out more towards the middle of the year. If you like what I have to say, then if you feel like you've got the time to read it, then I'd be honored. So, yeah, so there's many ways that people can sort of, I'm not present on Instagram. I'm a bit of a, that is going to change this year, but it's not, you know, it hasn't been my favorite thing to do, but like, I want to get this information out to people. So I've got to utilize what mechanisms I can to do that. Yeah, that's some of the things that people can, if they want to follow us, they can chase up.
Fantastic, and I'll put that in the notes. Excited for the book. I didn't realise. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's like I went away for a month, and I was absolutely amazed how easily it flowed.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited because I think for a lot of people who are ready to go on a different journey, I think it would be a good little Bible for them.
Wicked, mate. I'm excited as well. What's something you'd like to leave people with, a thought or a question or a way that you have a philosophy for your life, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I always like, I mean, because it's sort of my philosophy that people are, and you probably heard Pete Evans say this, but people are always, they're looking for the magic pill. And as I said, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. Yeah, okay, but it doesn't exist. Yeah, if you think there's going to be one thing that's going to fix all your problems, because as I said, like I mentioned, I can fix your gut, but then if you're not looking at your emotional health and so forth, then you're just going to get more gut issues again at some stage down the line. So guess what? Even though I did a gut protocol on you, that didn't fix all your problems. Guess what? It fixed your gut problems. Yeah, okay. So, but if I start looking at emotional state and I start investing time in that, and I start doing things like meditation and heart math and these types of mechanisms, and then also I'm addressing my gut health, and then also I'm looking at the quality of the food that I'm putting into my body, and then I'm also training smarter, not necessarily harder. You can train hard and smart. Yeah, okay. And then I'm moving more. Yeah, okay. I'm looking at the moving my body in the right way. Yeah, not always this linear patterns and so forth. So more complexity and articulation and so forth. If I'm doing asking my body to adapt by implementing some cold therapy and not always putting a jumper on when I'm shivering, because then we think shivering is a bad thing, where I'm saying, well, that's your body just trying to generate heat. Okay. So your body's trying to help you out, and then you just go, don't help me. Okay. Okay. Which just doesn't make sense. Yeah. Okay. So, but if I start implementing all these things, and I can tell you all the biochemical reactions that happen from all these things. So think about if that has such a biochemical benefit on the body. What happens if I add that one, and then 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 I add that one? And what have you got? I mean, the biochemical explosion on the body it's huge.
Nice, mate.
It's huge. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You're all that and more that people have recommended, and so it's awesome, man. I'm sure we could have talked for ages and ages, but we've got there's a key element there of sleep involved, and we both should.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed it, Ryan. It's great to meet you.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll talk again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, buddy. Have a good one.